This is not your everyday podcast. I've launched it because of three reasons. One, we don't really talk about fear, and I wanted to basically bring about a conversation to make it easier for people to discuss the problems that they go through, because quite often, through social media, etc., we only show our highlights, we only show our announcements, our reels, like the best things about our life, but many of us struggle to get to success. But no one really talks about what did they do to overcome their fears and their failures, and just to humanize leadership. The second point was about myths about leadership. A lot of younger generation think that people who are successful now, they didn't have to go through much and they became successful all of a sudden, and that's not true. And then the third one is just about inspiration and how to create change within your company, within your organization, and maybe you can talk a bit about the things that you've done to create change within the organizations that you've worked for. And then I have some personal questions that we can talk about. So number one, thank you very much for being a part of this interview. We are in the Houses of Parliament, is that correct?
We are indeed. Welcome.
Thank you very much. And what do you do, and what's your name?
Well, let's start off with my name. So, because that positions it better. My birth name is Michael John Hastings. Yep. But now, my legal name is Lord Hastings of Scarisbrick, with a CBE added on at the end. And I changed status in 2005 when the Queen was kind enough to award me a peerage to the House of Lords, which is a permanent position within the upper house of Parliament to enact for legislation, to question government, to raise themes and issues, to champion people's causes, to enjoy and enjoin with the dialogue and debate of the House and the issues we discuss, which range from mental health and disability right the way through to multilateralism, internationalism. The conversation at the moment is around Brexit, but let alone everything to do with Americanism and everything to do with Chinism and everything to do with the Middle Eastism and the future of development in sub-Saharan Africa. And then you come back to road issues in Wales and expenditures for Scotland, and whether or not in Northern Ireland criminal cases should have juries. The variety is endless. So my life is a kind of complex web of Parliament. I'm non-political. I'm not a member of a political party. I don't take a particular political position. I've never paid a penny to a political party, and I voted for the three major parties as it was: Conservative, Labour, Liberal Democrat. I voted for each one of them when I could vote. But now, of course, in the House of Lords, we don't vote in national general elections. We're alongside people who are in prison and people who are contained in facilities for mental support are also members of the House of Lords, so we don't vote. But that's, I suppose, because we get the joy of voting on the things that government does and is, and the things that MPs put forward. So life is a complex web between Parliament, business. I've been working with KPMG for 13 years, and that has meant driving something from the start, which was just a little germ of an idea, and turning it into a global mechanism, which is what it's become, and creating an entity in every corner of the world where all of our businesses, offices, countries are respectful of the environment, understand their duties towards the community, are involved in learning and development, investment, have a commitment to lifelong education, and understand that they go way beyond just making the profit of the edge line of the business. And that's been a success, and I'm thrilled about it. And then I work with Vodafone on the Vodafone Foundation board. I'm a chancellor of a university, Regent's University, Regent's Park, vice president of UNICEF, president of ZANE, which is Zimbabwe Aid Agency, a governor of Junior Achievement, which is a worldwide education body. And then I have a whole ton of wonderful brothers like you who I get to spend time with and share life with.
That is amazing, and I don't need to tell you how amazing you are, and I'm sure many people say the same thing. But I really want to take it back. So you've said so many things about what you do now and your accomplishments and your roles. Everyone has fears and everyone has challenges. And part of the podcast is to speak out about those fears and demystify what it means to be a leader and present a real person. So what fears have you had to overcome during your career?
Well, first of all, my dear beloved older brother, who is an academic, has always said to me, Michael, you've never had a career. And in that sense of the word, he's right, because I've just done a ton of different things. I've been a school teacher, I've been a government strategist, I've been a news reporter, I've been a presenter for television, I've been a lobbyist, I've been an activist, a communitarian, a university leader,
School governor.
I mean, oh boy.
Yes.
So I suppose what I'm saying in that is that I've not had what you call a career, but I would call it a career because after all, I've had an array of very, very, very rich experiences, and I don't worry about it now. But the only thing I ever used to worry about was, am I going to get found out that I'm just a generalist with no detail? As in, I'm not an auditor, and I'm not a commercial business player. But I understand an awful lot about the processes involved in both of those two things. I'm not a psychologist or a pharmacist, but I get it when it comes to medicine and medical conditions, and I think I understand a lot about how people feel and think. So, as a generalist, people say, but what are you? Because everybody loves to add a tag. You're a doctor, you're a physician, you're a psychologist, or you're a mechanic, you're an engineer, you're a data analyst, an accountant, a tax advisor, a strategist. They love these phrases, and the truth is we love them too. But I can't say that I am any one thing other than I can say I have an array of experiences, from education to business to community to politics to leadership. And I'll display, deport, use whatever the skill is that is necessary at the moment. For the moment and when it's required, I'll drag it out the back of my mind.
And how have you managed to make yourself feel confident about the fact that you're none of that, but you are a journalist, or you are, the person that you think you are, rather than the person that you think others think you are?
I think because, again, going back to my beloved brother, friend Anthony, and the other brothers who helped to mentor me in my early years, is they said to me something which I've tried to teach you and many others, is relationships really matter. And if you build bonds of relationship with people, I saw a quote the other day from Fionn Haig, who said, this is William Hague's wife, who said, learn to communicate in questions, not in exclamations. So if we're curious about people, I want to know more about how you're feeling, thinking, doing, pursuing. Where's life taking you? Tell me the detail. Somebody said to me today, they were a bit taken aback that I listened to them for so long. And I think it's really important. So you listen to people, ask questions, listen to people, be curious. Therefore you make great relationships. And if you make great relationships, they got your back. When things go down, they got your back.
Yeah.
When you need them to be there, they're there, because they're interested in continuing to secure this relationship. They value you, you value them. And that means that you can be comfortable in your skin, where you are, where you feel you want to be, because you know there's a whole bulk of people who value, treasure, love, and honor you.
Yeah. And I'm reflecting because, like, even for myself, I find it difficult sometimes to to not put myself in a box and say I'm this or I'm that, because sometimes people might say you're an accountant or you're a consultant or you're this and that, but I typically I don't think I am one of those. But I still struggle because I go into work or I go into places and people assume that I am that person, and then I try to adopt the skills and the capabilities and the personas of that particular person, and then sometimes I lose myself. I forget my identity, and it's nice to hear from you that you've kept that core value of knowing who you are and knowing that in the long run it will work out.
It will.
It will work out.
It will. And don't think, especially in today's world where it's not about being single job focused. You'll do an array of different jobs in your lifetime. You're in your early 20s now, and you're going to be in your 60s and probably do, this is the estimate, probably do 20 different jobs, because you'll be able to flex so well, and you can apply so many skills in different directions. So the old concept of the career, which was a straight, I went there, I stayed there for 35 years, is very rare now.
Yeah.
People are multifunctional. But isn't that part of the joy of a learning environment and a culture which allows us to move around, sometimes come back, but move around and grow?
I watched an interview of you and somebody else, and you said that your mission in life is to be the voice to the poor and to articulate the case for the poor. How did that come about?
Well, so I've believed now for the last, so I said it when I was 16, and now I'm in my early 60s. So you can do the maths. As a good accountant, you can do the maths. And for all those years, I believed exactly the same thing. I should speak for the poor, I should raise a voice for the poor, and I should bend the power of the prosperous to the potential of the poor. And that means that my mind and my heart is orientated to where the most poor people are. Now, at the moment, that happens to be in sub-Saharan Africa. That's where the largest numbers of people living in extreme poverty, need and hunger are, somewhere between 800 and 900 million. It came about because a friend at school just said, Michael, what are you going to do for you? What is going to be the important mission of your life? And I was 16, and had I begun thinking about it? I'm not so sure, but I remember at that moment when he said, what's going to be the mission of your life? And it just came out. And it's because it was something I felt very profoundly, that I wanted to get into a place where I had a voice, but also the opportunity to bend the power of the prosperous to the potential of the poor. So you make the poor dignify, as in present them as dignified people. Present the poor not as those in receipt of benefit or somehow handouts, but rather the poor are the people who have the opportunity to be great. They are the people who have the opportunity to be participant. They have the opportunity to be significant. They have the opportunity to be free. And we have to reorientate how we think about economy, reorientate how we think about enterprise and business, reorientate how we think about resources, and make sure that we dignify the poor. And that's why one of the things I feel very proud of that KPMG in the UK did, and we've begun to spread it around the world, was the creation of the living wage. And it meant, which is now UK governmental policy, and it just meant saying, well, just because somebody is working at a basic level doesn't mean to say they have to get the least possible. They need to earn what is going to allow them to live, to pay a rent or a mortgage, or to send their children to school with good shoes and clean clothes, and to make sure they can eat well rather than just eat stuff. So a living wage is a dignified way of blessing people who find that they're not on the fast circle of big profit or the millions, but rather deserve the attention that the millionaires get.
That's very powerful. There's two things that you mentioned in the same interview about a guy called Anthony. I don't know his surname, but already you're chuckling. And you said that he taught you two principles. One was belief.
Yes.
He encouraged you to believe basically he said he encourages those around him to learn to believe, and you was around him and he encouraged you to believe. The second thing was every connection is important because the person is important, so value people. Talk to me about that, those two things.
So I was 18
briefly.
and Anthony I think he was 32 at the time. And I went to, as a young black man, I went to a meeting in London, asked by someone else. I found I was the only non-white person in a circle of about 25. I came in, because I'd come from the north, all the way down to London to this meeting. I was 10 minutes late. Came in through the door, sat in the corner of the table, and I remember looking across to the other side of the table, and there was this man smiling at me. I thought, well, I don't know who he is. But anyway, he continued to smile at me, and when when the time was up, he came over, and he said, why are you here? Tell me about you. So I proceeded to tell me about you, and then we went and had a coffee together, and that was the beginning of a very important, significant, deep, and beautiful friendship. And here we are now, and I'm in my 60s, and he's in his 70s. And here we are, we're still close friends. We still messaging each other 40 years on. And so he taught me some very important things. He'd been in the military, he'd been in private business, I met his wife and his children. And and what he taught me was, every time you meet somebody, you could be meeting an angel unawares. So if you are meeting them and you honor them, try to remember their name, look at them with an interesting affection, not with a distancing, but rather with a come close. Try to discover who people are by asking questions rather than making exclamations. Rather than me saying, this is me, listen to me, I want to find out who are you. Hear them. Realize that in the same way that we touch this table, we've left our DNA on it. Our DNA is on this chair. Everywhere we go, we leave something of ourselves. So what is it we leave people with? And he taught me to understand that not every human encounter is going to be beautiful and generous. Sometimes they're a bit aggressive, sometimes they're a bit tense, because life isn't always beautiful and easy. But what if we could aim to leave people with an impression that we wanted to bless them rather than we wanted to take advantage of them? And if we could bless them, that might mean we just support them in the drama they're in. Or it could mean we help them to make a connection to somebody else. One of the things he said to me was, learn how to give your friends away. So build networks where people can gain the benefit of other people's connections. And so we're constantly benefiting one another. And then the belief point was a really important one, because he showed me something very important from a question that was asked of Jesus and recorded in the Gospels in John chapter 6, verse 28. And a whole lot of important religious leaders came up to him and they said, come on, what is it God wants us to do so that we can be acceptable? They called it the works of God. What are the works of God? And Jesus' response was, believe in the one that God has sent. And that really shocked them, because what they wanted to know was, how much money do I have to give away?
Yeah.
What good deeds must I perform? Who have I got to go and please? What position must I have in society to be worth it? How do I make myself look good? And Jesus says, believe. And to believe is to bring alive a very real and vivid part of ourselves that you cannot, you cut me to pieces, cut you to pieces, we cannot find our belief. In the same way as we can't find our imagination. Neither can we find our intentions, nor can we find our enthusiasms. There's whole lots of us that are just invisible, but they're so real, so real. And our belief is very, very, very real. And I've chosen since the age of 14 to believe.
That's powerful, very powerful stories that you can remember so vividly, like it was
Even though I'm so old.
I'm not saying that. But on this topic of belief, you instill a lot of belief in your mentees, and you have over 100 mentees. And I was thinking, what sentence can describe the impact that you've made on me? It took me ages to get to this one, but I've got something that almost captures it. And it goes like this. JFK said, "Very few of us have the greatness to bend history itself through repeated small acts of differences daily." So I feel, not just in my life, but many other brothers in their lives and your mentees, you've been able to affect our past and our present, so that when we're in the future time, 10, 20 years from now, our history has been bent because of you. And you've made those changes, not because you've given some people jobs or you're able to attend their weddings and that sort of stuff. More so the small acts of making sure that I'm all right, making sure that you call me on my birthday or you message me, making sure that if I have a concern or I have a small problem about work or health or anything like that, you're always there and you're only one call away. So why do you do that? That's the question. Why do you do that? And how do you do that?
Well, that's very kind of you to say what you said, and I'm glad you said that rather than you've been a real pain.
No, of course not.
Demanded things of me I couldn't possibly do. Why do I do that? Because I realized that I grew up with a great mum and a great dad, although my father died when I was 16 in a car accident. There were things that my father taught me very directly. My brother and I had we didn't see it as a privilege at the time, but I get it now, of our father reading us an important poem, Rudyard Kipling's If, every single Sunday. And the principles contained in there are all about how to mature and to grow. And a mother who was abundantly sacrificial. And we were educated extremely well and given all the opportunities that education could provide. We traveled the world and we saw things and had adventure. We lived well, and we lived sometimes with the struggle of life. And I got to see all of that and to emerge through it feeling happy, wholesome, and contented. And I'm not, I hope other people don't think I'm materialistic in the sense that I don't want things. I have to have things. We all have to have something, but I don't want lots of things. So what I learned was, goodness me, I began to realize that there were whole layers of people, particularly amongst young black men and women, who don't see life with that freedom, haven't felt the freedom of all that backing and support and enabling and connecting. And I had that. So I want to kind of teach it, share it, spend time with you and with others to say, how can I bless you, walk with you in this journey of transformation, think about your future. Is the wisdom I've gained over these 60 plus years that is something which you can just take a nugget and go and make the nugget work for you, or are there books I can recommend to you? So it's a kind of journey of releasing. Having gone through a long life of watching life in every corner of the world, at the heights of business, at the lows of communities, in the dust. And I saw something in that which I thought, I want to give that to you. What's the wisdom I've seen? And can I share it with you? And if you want to take something of it, then you take from it. And if you don't want to, then we just carry the journey on as far as we can go. And I hope what we can do is continuously go round and upwards, recognizing that none of us is sitting in a place where we're resolved, but we're all on a journey of progression. So as long as we keep progressing upwards, but always keep an eye and a hand on where the next person is, take somebody with you on that. And people did that for me. And I was blessed to have a number of Major General in the Army, Major General Sir John Nelson, wonderful man. Anthony, I've mentioned, another brother called Michael Fenton Jones, dear friend Tom Benyon, and my dear friend Jay John, I mean, so many others, Andy Corley, these men who've mentored me over 2 generations. And I've realized the power of that. So I want to give it back. And you're very receptive.
So one of the part of the podcast is also to, there's going to be a lot of young people listening to this, and I'm conscious that I want to help young people who are going into the workforce, equip them with something, and part of this conversation will help them demystify how to be themselves. So was there ever a point where you realized that you no longer needed to be somebody else, but you can be yourself? Was there a particular story, particular moment that you thought, wait a minute, I don't need to be this X or Y. I've now realized I can just be myself. That doesn't have to be when you were young, it could be later on in life, it could be any point.
It's a great question, because I think that the education and the caring and the home that our parents gave my brother and I meant that we didn't struggle with believing in the possible, but rather we were convinced that the possible would be the inevitable. My father was born in Angola, in a place of extreme health disaster and poverty. He ended up at Edinburgh University doing medicine and then becoming a dental surgeon. He then moved from Edinburgh to Jamaica, where he met my mother, who was a poor woman who never worked. And she was, as she would call herself, the bastard child of a Panamanian father and a half Ghanaian mother. So that's the background. Not special privilege, but vivid, open minds. And what I saw in both mum and dad, because of their the pressures under which they were born and brought up, was don't make excuses. Don't make excuses and raise objections and continue to seek options out. Instead, be thrilled that you've got a day in which you can do something useful. And then you'll have another one tomorrow, and then another one the next day, and hopefully the next week will be useful too. And you just carry on with this sense of the positive. So the journey of life has been about believing in the possible, always. And there was a particular moment when, so I was a school teacher, and there was a particular moment when the phone rang. It was 1986. And on the end of the phone was somebody who was working with the Prime Minister in number 10 Downing Street. And they rang and they asked me to come in and meet the Prime Minister. And I'm going, what? Why me? And the why me was because I was available, I was willing. They were looking for someone black. It helped.
Yep.
They wanted somebody who would relate to other people. I was open to possibilities. So here was I with a 2-2 from a university, a college. I mean, not a brilliant degree. My father had long died. My mother is living in the Caribbean. I'm trying to make life work as a school teacher. And I'm asked to go and do this significant role of transformation in broken communities just like that. And so I realized at that moment, I remember after that phone call thinking, so it isn't all about qualifications. And it isn't all about seeking status. And it isn't all about money. It is all about willing. Am I willing? And if I'm willing, am I prepared to invest this quantum of the mind to learn, to develop skills, to watch, to absorb, to practice effective principles, to put into the discipline of my being what is needed to achieve the outcome that benefits the other? I had to think differently. And if I was willing to think differently, I could do dramatic things.
That's amazing. And what age were you?
26.
So if you could cast your mind back just 5 years before that, 21, what would you have told your younger self as advice? And I say 21 because at that age, most people are leaving university, thinking about careers, wanting to figure out what career path to choose, going into workforces and workplace, and really starting their adulthood and their independence. So at that age, what advice would you give yourself now that you've been through that period?
Well, I actually do get asked very often to, what advice would you give 21-year-olds? And I say the same three things.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say them to you and to anyone who's listening to this. And I've said the same three things for the last pretty much 40-something years. Number one, begin your working life at whatever point that is with a mindset orientated to be a giver. The culture is about work and get, keep and own, buy and possess, show and tell. And I believe that it should be about enjoy and support, give and give again, look out for the vulnerable and the weak ones, empower others to appreciate their day. So I say give, number one. Start giving and don't stop giving. Number two, you better make sure that the privileges that an educated person gets, a higher income, maybe a job with a nice office, a good chair and a decent computer and a view out of some glassy window, you better make sure that you have enough in you to connect with people who don't have that privilege. So spend time with people who are not where you are. And the third thing, choose to live as simply as you can. Because that way you can acquire the really important assets of life. If we just spend on things that are short term, but not on the most critical economic asset that every individual needs in this environment is property. And the only way we're going to acquire property is to save towards the deposit and the purchase. So that means we can't be frivolous. Yeah. We don't need undue and unnecessary holidays. We've got to commit time to the structure to achieve the deposit necessary to maintain the mortgage. So think about hard assets, but think about soft qualities: generosity, compassion, permanence of commitment, a desire to understand where the other person is, and the giving mindset.
Nice solid three. I like it. A question here that I've got was around, I guess, setbacks. When you've had setbacks, how did you overcome? How did you challenge yourself to get back on track? Because life isn't a straight line. Life is up and down. Emotions are up and down. Your mindset is up and down. So how do you? What resources do you use? Who do you go to when you're feeling down? Because we all have those moments. And as a leader, because we don't often talk about in our sad moments, we're not as vulnerable in our, publicly. So how do you go about the times where you do feel not at your best, and what do you do to get back on track?
Well, I think it's important to begin every day with gratitude, and I do. It's important. Some people call it meditation, other people would call it prayer. I want to, and I do pray, seek the truth that I've discovered in the New Testament and the Old Testament. These are words ascribed over thousands of years that contain wisdom and truth in them. So I want to feed my mind with truth. And I also want to be in the presence of God and also in my soul. So it's important to begin a day with confidence. And that confidence comes from gratitude, it comes from realizing the joys that are set before you, the things you've got to do. They might be irritating, complicated, but those are the things you've got to do. So thank God for them. Get on with it, get in with it. Yes, setbacks, because we all have to work with others, and we've got to go with the wharf of demands, and none of us is, as we often say, an island to ourselves. And even the bosses of the biggest companies have got people around them who are saying legally that, communications the following, won't work well, that person doesn't agree. You've always got restraints around you. So working with people, collaborating. And it's important to have a mindset that says whatever is not achieved today might be tried tomorrow. And if it's not achieved tomorrow, you can try it again the next day. Thomas Edison, who created the light bulb so that we literally see the light in a building, said that he hadn't failed, he had just found 10,000 ways not to do it. And I think that's fascinating. We haven't failed, we've just found a whole ton of ways to do it differently. And if we have a mindset that says, ultimately, I'll crack this. So I'm not giving up till I do. I'm going to crack it. And if it takes me all of life to make a meaningful difference to a community of people, then I'm going to do that for all of life to make that difference.
You and I are believers of Jesus Christ. How has Jesus' life impacted your life?
Well, I think one of my favorite and most important descriptions in the book of John, where John, his close disciple, follower, writes these words: Jesus, knowing where he had come from, i.e. the creator of all things, the Son of God, knowing where he'd come from and knowing where he was going to, as in he's about to get crucified and die, rise again and go back to be with his Father, the creator of all things. Knowing where he'd come from, knowing where he was going to, got up from the table, found a towel, a bowl of water, got down on his knees and washed his disciples' feet. You see, he was certain, I know where I've been, I know who I am, and I know where I'm going. So the task ahead of me is to bless those around me.
Powerful. I like that. Very simple as well. It's a simple message and it's clear. And that's helped you with your mission statement, and it ties in with your vision. So how do you unlock your own vulnerability? Because it is difficult for people who are not vulnerable, or people who think power means to be strong and to not talk about your fears and that image of like I'm superior. But truly the real essence of power, in my opinion, is strength through vulnerability. So how do you unlock your vulnerability when faced with life?
Well, thank goodness you and I now live in an era where people will talk about mental health openly. The struggles with mental health, where people who have been afflicted with a limb loss, maybe through a bomb, or as a result of war, or because of a severe sickness or a disability, can now feel as equally participant in society than previously, where they had to be hidden away. Thank goodness we live in a society now where we can acknowledge that some people, children and adults, have special needs. Dyslexia and dyspraxia. These were alien words in the 70s. They're now common practice. So in other words, nobody's afraid to say, I feel anxious and screwed up, and life is turbulent. And thank goodness we live in an age now where we can do that. And we've seen the most brilliant of sports leaders cry publicly, and princes talk of the loss of their mother and the agony that has meant for them as individuals. And seeing people at the helm of business step away for a year because they needed to kind of sort out the stress in their spirit.
Yeah.
This is wonderful because it does mean that I can tell you, you can tell me that life doesn't feel good right now. I'm battling with an emotion, or struggling with a fear, or I'm thinking things about myself which are kind of like old and I could have let go of them ages ago, or I'm worrying about a child or a prospect, and that vulnerability is acceptable. That's great. Our society wants us all to be tolerant of each other and inclusive of each other. That means that however you present and however I present, that's fine.
We're coming nearly to the end of our interview, and I normally end my interviews with this particular question. You might need some time to think about it, your answer. So the question is, so I don't get it wrong, how would you define your leadership style?
Maybe 3, maybe 4 things. Number 1, listen to people giving you a perspective. So you've set out a vision for change. I've set out a vision for change, or to do something, to achieve an objective. Therefore, then listen to people's challenge to that. As long as the challenge is constructive and it's about enabling the vision to go forward, listen attentively. I think leadership starts with listening. Engage others in the journey. I built a team within the business in KPMG and the other places where I am, built teams of people who can deliver things without me being there. As long as you set the why. The why is really important. If people know, well, why is that important? They go, oh, so that's what we need to do. So always explain the why. Be clear about the why. So listen hard, be clear about the why, and explain the why. Thirdly, go do it yourself. It's when the Queen has a state banquet, she checks the knives and the forks, the plates and the glasses around that banqueting table before her guests come. The highest person possible in a business or an organization must be involved in the basics. It's really important. If you get to the point where everything is done for you and you never have to do anything, you never engage in anything yourself, you become totally disconnected with reality. So be connected to reality, do it yourself. And I think, fourthly, persist in the purpose you set out. Life is full of naysayers. Can't happen, won't happen. You won't achieve it, they won't support you. It's not a great idea. There's no money, no strategy. That's too difficult. It'll take too long. Is it worth it?
Yeah.
Oh, there's always naysayers. To which the answer is, if I can, I will. I'd love you to join me, but if you don't, I'm going anyway. We must do this because it's important. It's vital to show the best of ourselves. This big purpose to which we're driven, this invigorates, energizes, and empowers me. And I'd love you to share that.
I love that. Is there any questions you have for me before we finish the interview? Because I don't want it to feel like it's just me asking you loads of questions. If there was one question you wanted to ask me, feel free. If there's not, no worries.
Do you think it's cool not to wear a tie?
Well, my previous interview I didn't wear one, so I thought let me just continue this trend. But I didn't know it would affect this interview that much. Maybe I should. Do you think it adds to the whole like where we are, the scene, my professionalism? Like, what does it add to the interview? I don't get it.
I just want to see what colour you chose to go with.
There we have it. All. Thank you very much, guys.
You're great, Ollie.
Thank you. I'll leave it. How did you think that went?
Fantastic. I loved it. It's nice to talk about stuff, me and what I think and feel.
Yeah, because like
I love it.
It's been a long time coming. We've known each other a couple of years, and I've always wanted to find the right questions for you, and I'm really happy that you agreed to it, but also that we can share a bit of the nuggets and the stories, the powerful stories that you mentioned, so that people can take their truths and use it in their lives practically. That's really important. And hopefully, we can be disruptive and we can give people some food for thought. And hearing it from yourself as well is amazing, because they know it's real, they know it's authentic, and hopefully we can change just one person to believe that, number one, that they can be who they want to be, two, that they don't have to listen to naysayers, and three, to not lose themselves. Like, they don't have to be a particular person. You can be a journalist, you can be whatever you want, but just to be clear on that. So thank you for sharing, and yeah, we're probably late for the next meeting, so that's it.
Thank you. Well done, well done.